This is the Red Roof Recovery Show, a program to soften the path of recovery from substance and behavior addictions. And you know what? It's not just for addictions, it's for life. I first want to take a moment to thank Russell Allen Scott. Russell has gifted me the use of this beautiful piece of music. It's called Greatest Bravery. And it's certainly an appropriate theme song for this show because it has taken great bravery for me to come out of the proverbial closet to start publicly speaking about my own addictions to drugs and alcohol. But like I said, this program is far more about just addictions. It's about life. And the messiness of life includes no shortage of mental health illnesses and mental health disorders like addictions. My name is Tanya McIntyre, and I appreciate you spending the next 30 minutes with me as I share the experience that I have acquired over the years as I walk my own path of recovery. I use a variety of tools and techniques that I'll be sharing with you on each episode of the Red Roof Recovery Show. And you will often hear me say that there are literally hundreds of tools that you can use to manage recovery and the messiness of life. I think the key is to just keep looking for what works for you. And when you find it, grab onto that and then do more of it. I'm very grateful to have a guest with us for this episode of the Red Roof Recovery Show. His name is Dr. S1E9, and he is a pulmonary and critical care specialist in Ontario, Canada. Dr. Naeem's work inspired him to write his first book. It's called Healing from the Inside Out, Overcome Chronic Disease and Radically Change Your Life. Dr. Naeem, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Tanya. Looking forward to our conversation.
Now, during the course of your career, Dr. Naeem, you noticed that the majority of the patients that you were dealing with just weren't healing from their chronic disease, and they can actually remain trapped in that paradigm of chronic disease. I find that fascinating, and I'm curious to know why that is. Why do people choose to stay stuck in chronic disease?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, which I will try to answer in the short time we have. The thing is that, you know, when most people look at healing, they look at the physical, and this is true of the conventional medical world or Western medicine. They look at the physical body. In fact, medical school education is all predicated on our physiology and just sees us as our physiology. Now, the thing that I discovered, and this was years and years of reading and research and my own introspection, is that we are not just physical beings. We are multifaceted beings. And I can get into that a little more. We have our thoughts, which originate from our mind. And, you know, we look at our mind. There's the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. And most of our behavior arises from the subconscious mind, which is programmed in early childhood. There is our emotional self, and emotions are how our physically incarnate self here on this earth it communicates with our higher self. And I'll talk about the higher self in just a few minutes. So there's our emotional self. And most people don't understand how to manage their emotions. You know, we run towards positive emotions and we run away from, you know, negative emotions, things like fear, grief, shame, regrets, those sorts of things. We run towards joy and happiness and love, but we are meant to experience the full spectrum of emotions, you know, in our lives here.
It might be helpful, though, if we even go back to, like you said, a lot of the programming comes from our early childhood. And emotional intelligence is not something that's really talked about. It certainly wasn't in my family. If anything, emotions were something to be swept under the carpet. You know,
exactly. So,
your mother's coming home soon and she doesn't want to hear about that. So, you know, just don't be talking about that around your mother. Yes.
So, I mean, you know, a lot of us were not taught emotional intelligence. It's not something that, you know, I was not taught, you know, by my parents or my extended family. I didn't learn it definitely from school. This was a long, arduous journey that I had to go on myself with difficult emotions and dealing with them and learning how to navigate them. So certainly this is not something that is taught. And, I devote a whole chapter in my book to talking about the emotional self, and another chapter talking about fear. I devote a whole chapter to fear in my book, because fear is such a strong emotion. Especially in the time we're in right now, in the midst of this pandemic, which is now going into its third year. So, we need to learn how to manage our emotions for healing, and we often get stuck in negative emotions. We suppress those negative emotions, and when you suppress negative emotions, they become trapped and they manifest as symptoms. And this is one of the reasons why you asked the original question, why do people get stuck in the paradigm of chronic disease? This is not the only reason, but it is one of the reasons why people get stuck in the paradigm of chronic disease. And speaking of addiction, people often turn to addiction in its many forms to deal with the suffering that those suppressed emotions inherently bring to the individual. And so just to go on, I was talking about all the multifaceted beings that we are. We also have a vibrational level of being. So what I mean by that is that we are energy beings. If we break us down to our fundamental unit of matter, we are made of atoms, which are made of subatomic particles. And quantum physics tells us that those subatomic particles are just a vibrational frequency.
Well, yeah,
so
I think
all we are is a vibrational frequency.
The science I learned was old Newtonian physics, where the universe was suspected to be matter, and now we know that the universe is just energy. We're just basically bouncing blobs of energy in an energetic universe. And so why do you think we developed, Dr. Name, why did we develop, from a medical perspective, why do we separate physical and mental health?
That's a good question. I don't have all the answers to that, but I believe that one of the reasons is that our medical education is based on that Newtonian linear model, right? To get from point A to B, point A being illness and point B being cure or optimal health, the medical profession just looks at it as a linear path. But it is far from a linear path, right? We have to take into account all these different aspects of who we are in any healing path. And if you look at the word healing, it originates from the word whole. And the mission of healing is to cultivate and integrate all the different levels of who we are in the process of becoming whole. So you have to understand that illness and disease arises in a context. It doesn't arise, out of nowhere. It arises in a context, and that context is our thoughts, our emotions, the life stories that we have lived and that we often identify with. It arises in the context of, our energy, our vibrational frequency, and our level of consciousness. And consciousness is the higher self, is that highest level of being. It's the deepest level of being. And few people live from a place of consciousness. And, from a religious perspective, some people may call that spirit or soul. I prefer to use the word consciousness or being, because it doesn't, it encompasses all different beliefs and belief systems, and even people who are not religious. So consciousness is where we have to come from, the deepest level of who we are, and integrate all these different aspects of who we are in the process of becoming whole, in order to truly heal. And this is why people get stuck in the paradigm of chronic disease.
And Dr. Naeem, as a critical care specialist, what is the most common chronic diseases that you are seeing?
Oh, sorry, you cut out there for just most common.
What are the most common chronic diseases that you see in your profession?
Well, the most common chronic disease, when as a critical care physician, I deal with acute illness, people who are, very critically ill. But the most common chronic diseases I see are are hypertension, there's diabetes, there's heart disease, there's all sorts of cancers, there's dementia. I mean, these are the most common. And, there's been studies done that show that a lot of these chronic diseases arise from stress, from chronic stress. And, we're living in a society that is just so overwhelmed with stress. And that has come out more so in the last 2 years with the pandemic. And, the thing is that, when we were long before modern society evolved, when we were, if you look at our indigenous ancestors, when we lived out, in nature, our stresses were different than they are now. I mean, we had to find food, we had to forage, we had to hunt, had to find shelter, protect ourselves from predators. And then, those were the stresses at that time. Now, in modern society, almost everything has become a trigger for stress. Our relationships, our jobs, the media, the news, what's going on in the world. I mean, everywhere you look, people are just overwhelmed.
And I think the news in itself can become an addiction for people. I talk to people all the time who start their day with the morning news and they end their day with the evening news. And I ask people to kind of ruminate on that idea that you're planting in your subconscious bad news to begin your day.
Right.
And you're ending the day with bad news. And you're going to basically just kind of marinate in that all night during your sleep. And
that's a very good point, Tanya.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
Well, I spent 22 years as a broadcaster in mainstream media. So, I know firsthand that the agenda of mainstream media is to perpetuate what I like to call the FUD factor, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I'm embarrassed to say now that I participated in that agenda for so long. It chipped away at my soul toward the latter part of my career, which is why I made a decision to step away from it. But, I often talk about our morning meetings would be spent sitting in a circle, coming up with the most fearful headlines, the most sensational, fear-inducing headlines, and then embellish the facts around that. And that was my job. That's the job in a newsroom, is to just create sensational headlines, embellish the facts, and it's all fear-based. Fear, fear, fear. How can we perpetuate this fear, uncertainty, and doubt? Because when people are frozen in fear, what are they more likely to do? Buy something or take something to feel better.
Right. So it's all tied in with marketing and advertising and consumerism and materialism and getting people to spend on, like you said, products and services that don't necessarily serve them and don't necessarily help them on their life path, help them heal, for lack of a better term. And I totally agree with you. I mean, I think it's all kind of tied in together. And this is why it's so important to start off your day on the right foot. One of the tenets of a healing path is how you start your day. And that could be different for different people, right? I mean, it could be, for someone, it could be meditation. For someone else, it could be working out, it could be stretching, it could be reading something inspirational, it could be writing. It's different for all of us, but we need to start off our day on that positive note, not, like you said, listening to the news media, which I find has gotten worse over the last few years in the midst of this pandemic.
Well, I think that's because the source of media is shrinking. So everything we watch, read, and listen to now is controlled by a handful of multi-billion-dollar conglomerates. And the narrative is the same. The narrative is to perpetuate the FUD factor big time. And, I kind of jokingly say with people, take the diet that really works. A media fast, a digital diet, right? Don't watch, read, or listen to news and feel how much your life improves. Or you can watch, read, or listen to positive things and feel the joy that life can bring. Whatever way you want to spin it, make it part of your daily routine to make sure that you're being the gatekeeper of your mind and only letting those selective messages in that are going to serve you in a healthy way. Difficult to do.
You bring up a great point. So the media is designed to create stories, right? And, if we look at all our lives, our lives consist of stories as well. So, a lot of us have, not so wonderful stories, in our different points in our lives. And we also have great stories as well. The issue is when we identify with those stories, and we need to realize that we are not our life story. Our life story is the context in which our consciousness evolves, in this physical incarnation. And that's all our life story is. And then when we identify with our life stories, or people who are close to us, their stories, or family stories, or ancestral stories, or what the news media is selling us, right? That is going to also keep us trapped in the paradigm of chronic disease. There's also just stories that people create around their illness. There's the victim story, right? I mean, if someone, sees themselves as a victim at any point in their lives, that can be, the illness can replace that, and you can become a victim of your illness. Then there's the boredom story. There's so many people that are just bored, and the disease helps fill that void.
Now, as a doctor, are you required to follow the diagnostic manual when you are looking at symptoms from people to diagnose them with a disease or a condition? Because I know a lot of doctors in America are not a big fan of that manual, because people tend to then become...
Sorry, you're talking about the DSM?
DSM, the Diagnostic Something Manual.
So the Diagnostic Statistical Manual is the manual that's used by psychiatrists and psychologists to diagnose mental health and psychiatric conditions. So I'm not a practicing psychiatrist.
Sorry,
So I don't actually use the DSM. And, I would, if I had a patient who had a mental health condition, I would consult the appropriate specialist to help me make the diagnosis. I mean, the thing is that, I've had a lot of experience in the intensive care unit dealing with people who have anxiety, depression, addiction, personality disorders, bipolar, and all sorts of these things. But I wouldn't make that diagnosis in unison. I would make it with the help of a mental health professional.
But you had referred to the fact that sometimes people can use chronic disease the chronic disease manifests because of emotions that are repressed.
Yes. Right. That's for sure.
So oftentimes we can become the diagnosis, was the point I was trying to make. So I didn't realize that the DSM was primarily for psychiatric conditions, because a lot of psychiatrists consider they don't like the DSM because sometimes if the symptoms are related to a defined condition, then a person can fall into that trap of then being defined by that condition and using it as an excuse to not get better.
So certainly, the lines are often blurred when you're looking at conditions that affect our mental and emotional health. And, there's all these labels that, we give people, but I find that it's often not that simple and cut and dry. I think, individuals are very complicated, and, that comes from each individual having a very unique history, a story, unique experiences, unique upbringing, all the different influences that have gone into making that individual who he or she is. So I agree with you that I don't use it, but I don't like the DSM. It may be applicable to certain situations, but to widely apply it to every patient and every condition, I think that is a little short-sighted.
So when you're talking to somebody,
more complex.
When you're talking to somebody who is suffering with a chronic illness, disease, and you suggest to them that perhaps they could do some subconscious work, what do you generally receive from people when you suggest that?
it depends on the individual, because there are people who have never heard of what we've been talking about here: the mind, the emotions, energy, consciousness, and they are so far from that understanding of health and healing. But there's other people who are more open to it, right? So when I see a patient or a client, I try to feel out where they're at. And if I feel that I can take the conversation in that direction, then I do open them up to the ideas that, your thoughts, your mind, your emotions, your energy, and your energy is dependent upon a lot of things, including the amount of sleep you get, the food you eat, the amount of physical activity you're getting, and your deeper consciousness, who you truly are beyond, because when you strip away the physical body, the thoughts, your mind, your emotions, what's left? All that left is that consciousness, or that being, that pure essence of who we are. So getting back to the patients. So, if they are open to that, I will start exploring that with them. However, if they're not, everybody understands stress, right? Stress is something that it doesn't matter what your level of understanding is of consciousness and metaphysics and healing and psychology. Everybody understands stress. So if I feel that they're not ready to go into that deeper conversation, I will start off by asking them about, what's going on in their lives. Are they under a lot of stress? How are their relationships? Are they happy in their career? Are they, how their lifestyle? Are they getting enough sleep? So everybody, regardless of their understanding of the deeper aspects of healing, understands the concept of stress. We all do. So I can often start the conversation there.
Well, that's good that you take the time to do that, Dr. Naeem, because I know doctors have said in the past that the biggest challenge they face is time constraints. So when a parent comes in with a 5-year-old suffering from asthma, the only thing they have time to do is give a prescription for the stress hormone, a puffer, instead of taking the time to say, well, why is a 5-year-old coming to me with stress? What can possibly be stressful in a 5-year-old's life? There's just no time.
Right. There is no time. And the thing is that, I will say that I am far from perfect. I believe that more time is needed with each individual and each patient. Unfortunately, I do operate within with the Western medical system and how it operates. So I am limited in how much I can do. I am trying to find ways to break away from that. It is difficult to do that in Canada, here in Ontario. But it's a work in progress. I mean, I'm trying to bridge two worlds. I'm trying to bridge the world of conventional Western medicine and a more holistic, whole health approach to healing. And it's not an easy path that I've taken. It's not easy to do. Even amongst my peers, I mean, they're content just sticking to the status quo. They don't want to rock the boat. And to do this on a large scale takes resources. I mean, you have the influence of big pharma and other medical based companies that do not. I mean, their vested interest is to push their pharmaceuticals. Now, I'm not saying that patients don't need medications at some point in their illness. Of course they do, especially when it's severe. But to just prescribe conventional treatments and not looking at the context in which the disease or the illness arose, or the context in which they got ill, I feel is not doing justice to the patient. We need a whole health approach, a holistic approach. And I'm just one of many people that are trying to do this right now, in North America anyways, that I know of.
So when you're looking at a more holistic approach, when you're operating within the confines of our Canadian medical system, again, you're facing, I'm sure, more time constraints around that. So yes. Getting people to move from, that kind of conventional medical approach to a more open approach of, looking a little bit deeper as to what may be creating what is the cause, instead of just creating or treating the symptoms, rather. For the most part, are the majority of the people you deal with open to that idea, or do you get a lot of resistance?
I think the majority of people are open to the idea that stress is a big factor in their illness. I would say a smaller percentage are open to the idea of discussing the issue of mind, emotions. If I talk about something like energy and vibrational frequency, it's a foreign language for most people. They have no idea what I'm talking about, right? So I may not necessarily go there. In terms of the deeper consciousness of who we are, the underlying being, it all depends on the individual, right? If a person is a spiritual person, they may be open to that, to understanding that. Very religious. They may be open to that idea, but it varies, across the whole spectrum of patients. I would say the entry point for me for majority of patients has to do with stress, because everybody is under a tremendous amount of stress, especially what's happened in the last 2 years. Relationships are strained, people's careers are being affected, people are losing jobs. There's financial hardships. So everyone is under stress, but the thing is that we need to realize is that, there is a deeper part to who we are from which we can source our lives. And from where, if we live our lives from that deeper consciousness or that being, we can navigate all the different challenges and adversities that we are facing. Because the thing is, the nature of being human is that we are going to be challenged. Our lives are not going to be smooth from birth to death. We're going to be challenged. We're going to be facing obstacles. But there's a reason life is designed this way, because I believe that our lives are a process, not a static entity. Our lives are.
You're breaking up a little bit on us now, Dr. Naim. But I think I get the gist, is that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So I want to thank you so much for your time and insights today, Dr. Nouman Naim. Dr. Naim continues his medical practice in Ontario, Canada. And of course, the goal is bridging conventional medicine with a more holistic...
Purpose is to... we all have the same purpose. Our purpose is to discover who we truly are, awaken to our true nature. How that purpose expresses in each individual's life is unique, and is unique to them. And their mission on this planet it will be different for each individual, but all of it helps us discover our true nature, our true purpose, which is to discover who we are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Nouman Naim. Dr. Naim, thank you so much.
That's right.
Dr. Naim continues his medical practice in Ontario, Canada, with the goal of bridging conventional medicine with a more holistic...
Very much time.
Thanks, Dr. Naim. You can connect with Dr. Naim at his website, noumannaim.com, and you can buy his book on Amazon, Healing from the Inside Out, Overcome Chronic Disease and Radically Change Your Life. I've authored a couple of books myself available on Amazon, Mindful Wisdom from My Philosopher Dad, and book number 2, Daily Wisdom from My Philosopher Dad. And this one is set up like a journal with inspirational messages every day. So my hope is that you not only buy my books, but you also take some time in that Daily Wisdom book to reflect on those messages and maybe write down your intentions for the day. I have found that the power of words is very powerful. And the power of the written word is magical and is often life transformational. It certainly has been for me. So let's remember, talk to ourselves like we talk to our best friends. We spend a lot of time talking to ourselves in our heads. So let's make it a nice place to be. My name is Tanya McIntyre. Thank you so much for being here. May the force be with you. And remember, you are the force.